Late one stormy night, Sarah Miller was fast asleep in her small but cozy house in a quiet neighborhood in Ohio. The sound of rain tapping against the windows made the entire house feel peaceful, and she was wrapped tightly in her blanket, her breathing slow and steady. Sarah had always been a light sleeper, but the exhaustion from the long day had finally allowed her to drift into deep rest. She didn't expect anyone to disturb her, especially at this hour, when the town itself felt dead silent except for the storm. She wasn't expecting company, but around 2 in the morning, the front door creaked. The sound was soft at first, almost blending with the rain, but enough to stir her. She turned slightly in bed, half aware, and then settled again. She didn't know it yet, but someone had just entered her home. The man who stepped in was her father-in-law, Richard Miller. Normally, Richard was polite and somewhat distant. He was the type of man who always wore a pressed shirt, always serious, and rarely visited unannounced. But tonight, he was different. His expression was grim, and his steps were heavy, almost hesitant. His presence inside Sarah's home at such an hour was strange, and even he seemed unsure why he had come. Richard stood in the living room, staring into the darkness. The rain rattled harder against the windows, and a gust of wind made the walls groan. He whispered Sarah's name, but she didn't stir. Slowly, he walked through the hallway, each step echoing as though the entire house could hear. Sarah shifted in her sleep, a flicker of unease brushing through her chest, though she was still lost in her dream. Her eyes finally fluttered open when she sensed the shadow in the doorway. For a moment, she thought she was still dreaming. The shape of a tall figure stood there, and her heart immediately jolted. "Richard," she said in a shaky whisper, her throat dry from sleep. Her father-in-law didn't respond right away. He just stood there, caught in some internal struggle. The storm outside crashed louder, a perfect backdrop for the unsettling silence inside. "What are you doing here?" Sarah finally asked, her voice trembling. She sat up slowly, pulling her blanket around her shoulders, both for warmth and a sense of safety. Richard sighed heavily, the weight of his breath filling the room. "I didn't mean to startle you," he muttered. I just needed to talk." Sarah blinked, her mind struggling to catch up with the bizarre reality. "At 2 in the morning? You could have called," she said cautiously, trying to keep her tone steady, though she could feel her pulse racing. Richard stepped closer into the dim light. His face looked older than usual, worn by some invisible burden. His eyes seemed restless, almost haunted. Sarah had known him for years, but tonight, he seemed like someone else entirely. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Things have been heavy on my mind." Sarah shifted uncomfortably, unsure if she should feel sympathetic or scared. "About what?" she asked softly. Richard hesitated, his gaze flickering toward the window where the rain streaked down. "About family. About choices. About things that shouldn't have happened." His words were cryptic, carrying a tension that made Sarah's skin crawl. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second stretching into eternity. Sarah's heart was pounding so hard that she was sure he could hear it. She forced a calm tone. "Richard, maybe we should talk in the morning. It's late. You can sit in the living room, and I'll make coffee when the sun comes up." But Richard didn't move toward the living room. Instead, he lingered closer, and Sarah felt the air in the room grow heavy. She realized then that something wasn't right at all. This wasn't a simple late-night visit. "Sarah," he said quietly, "there are secrets in this family you don't know. Things your husband hasn't told you. Things that could destroy everything." Her blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" she whispered. Richard pulled out a small, worn notebook from his coat pocket. He placed it on her nightstand, his hand trembling. "It's all in here. Read it when you're ready. But once you do, nothing will be the same." Sarah's fingers itched to open it right away, but the fear in her chest told her to wait. "Why are you giving this to me now?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Richard looked at her with a mix of guilt and urgency. "Because the past has a way of waking up when we least expect it. And once it does, it doesn't go back to sleep." The words lingered in the air like a curse. He turned, walked out of the room, and moments later she heard the front door open and close again. The storm swallowed the sound of his departure, leaving Sarah in stunned silence. She sat frozen, staring at the notebook on her nightstand. Every instinct told her not to touch it, not to uncover whatever darkness it held. But curiosity, mixed with dread, gnawed at her. Finally, her shaking hands reached for it. The notebook was filled with Richard's handwriting, messy and frantic. As Sarah flipped through the pages, her eyes widened in horror. There were confessions, secrets about old betrayals, family scandals, and even crimes. Names were written down, dates recorded. Some of the entries pointed directly at her husband, Daniel, linking him to things she never thought possible. The rain outside grew harsher, thunder cracking through the night as Sarah's breathing quickened. Each word she read shattered the image she had of her family. She felt as though her entire world was crumbling in her hands. Her phone buzzed suddenly, making her jump. It was a text from an unknown number. The message read, "Don't trust Richard. Burn the notebook. He's dangerous." Her hands shook violently now. Who sent the message? Was someone watching her? And most importantly, who was lying? Richard or the unknown sender? She set the notebook down, her mind spinning. The sound of footsteps echoed again in the hallway, but this time, she wasn't sure if it was real or if her fear was tricking her senses. She called out softly, "Hello?" No answer. Sarah sat frozen, clutching her blanket, listening to the storm and the faint creaks of her house. Her father-in-law's unexpected visit had turned her night into a nightmare. She wasn't sure what to believe, who to trust, or what was coming next. And somewhere deep inside, she knew that opening that notebook was only the beginning of something far darker.